Hello, I'm Bernd Schneider, and I present you today, and I'm really excited to present you today the subject, the Agile CPW subject-object relationship diagram modeling with the CPW process modeling, with the CPW process method, and the CPW method. And I'm Bernd Schneider, and I'm from Zurich, Switzerland. With the Agile CPW subject-object relationship diagram modeling is introduced how from a business process with a CPW process modeling, with a CPW process method and the CPW method step by step in an agile way, a CPW subject-object relationship diagram can be created and realized. With a CPW process method, the CPW process and the CPW process step is represented as a simple sentence with a CPW subject, a CPW predicate, and a CPW object. From the CPW process level 1, the CPW process level 2, and the CPW process level 3 can be created the CPW subject-object context diagram clusters to create a CPW subject-object context diagram. Afterwards can be created from the CPW subject-object context diagram and the CPW process level 3, the CPW subject-object relationship diagram. The CPW subject-object relationship diagram can be transformed then into an entity relationship diagram. With the Agile CPW subject-object relationship diagram modeling and the CPW process modeling with the CPW process method and the CPW method is introduced a method modeling approach how business process design, business process improvement, and business process transformation can be realized and transformed in an agile way. With the Agile CPW subject-object relationship diagram modeling is introduced how from a business process with the CPW process modeling with the CPW process method and the CPW method step by step in an agile way, a CPW subject-object relationship diagram can be created and realized. Now we are coming to the first question with the CPW process modeling. The question as to how the Agile CPW subject-object relationship diagram modeling with the CPW method and the CPW process method can be made is first of all introduced the CPW process modeling with the example of the coffee shop. Introduced are only some parts of the end-to-end process. How a client comes into the coffee shop, expresses his wishes, decides for a special coffee. After that, he pays, and then he takes the coffee and leaves the coffee shop. The following figure 1 shows the first CPW process steps with the CPW process method and the process steps with business process modeling notation 2.0 when the client comes into the coffee shop. What we see here is on the left-hand two columns, the CPW process method. On the right-hand two columns, we have the representation with business process modeling notation 2.0. We start in the left column with the first CPW process step, where the CPW process step is represented as a simple sentence with a CPW subject, a CPW predicate, and a CPW object. And each of them has an own graphical object. So we start with the CPW subject is coffee shop sales assistant. And in addition, we have a concrete name, it's Mary. And then we have the CPW predicate says, and then we have the CPW object with hello. What we see also, Mary says hello. The CPW process step, which is represented as a simple sentence with the CPW subject, CPW predicate, and the CPW object, is represented in direct speech. In the next row, we have hashtag step 001 and hashtag welcoming to client, which means the CPW process step which is represented as a simple sentence with the CPW subject, CPW predicate, and the CPW object, is abstracted now as hashtag welcoming to client. And this abstract function has been used on the right side to represent the process step for business process modeling notation 2.0. Welcoming to client. In the further next row from the CPW object, we see hashtag activity, hashtag task. Which means the process step from business process modeling notation 2.0 has been represented now in hashtag notation. Hashtag activity, hashtag task. But later I will tell more about it. And then you have the next process steps where the coffee shop client says hello, and coffee shop sales assistant Mary says, what do you like? And on the right side, we have all abstract functions, welcoming to client, welcoming to assistant, takes order from client. Figure 1 shows a representation of the business process coffee shop with process steps, welcome and questions to the client with the CPW process steps, with the CPW process method, and the process steps with business process modeling notation 2.0. In the above representation, you see in the left two columns the representation of the coffee shop process with the CPW process method, and in the two right-hand columns the representation with the business process modeling notation 2.0. There are only 3 represented process steps, but it is enough to explain a few things. First of all is introduced the CPW process steps with the CPW process method. In the swimline with header of the left column are described the CPW process steps of the coffee shop sales assistant, and in the adjacent column the CPW process steps of the coffee shop client. In the above representation of figure 1, you see in the two left-hand columns a representation of the business process coffee shop with the CPW process method, and which is representing according to the CPW process method. The CPW process and the CPW process step is represented as a simple sentence with a CPW subject, a CPW predicate, and a CPW object. At the represented CPW process step as CPW process is the process in the conventional sense represented as CPW predicate in the context of the responsibility with the CPW subject and the process result with the CPW object. At the first CPW process step is the CPW subject not only the coffee shop sales assistant, but also there is a concrete name, namely Mary. What you also see is that the CPW process at this CPW process step, first of all, is represented in direct speech as follows. CPW subject, hashtag coffee shop sales assistant, hashtag Mary, CPW predicate, hashtag says, CPW object, hashtag hello. Furthermore, at this CPW process step of the CPW process represented in direct speech, the CPW process has been abstracted as a function in the next row within the corresponding CPW object and is represented with the hashtag notation inclusive CPW process step number as follows. Hashtag step 001, hashtag welcoming to client. This abstraction level of the described function is also used then to describe on the right side the process step of business process modeling notation 2.0. The described process step of business process modeling notation 2.0 is an activity and task. On the left side, at the CPW process, the described process step of business process modeling notation 2.0 as activity and task is described with hashtag notation in the next row of the corresponding CPW object as follows. Hashtag activity, hashtag task. The described hashtag notation of hashtag activity, hashtag task has been taken from the list of the CPW logical layer business process modeling notation 2.0. In the list of CPW logical layer business process modeling notation 2.0, you can represent a major part of business process modeling notation 2.0. You see in the brackets we have two references, reference 1 and reference 4. Reference 4 is the specification from business process modeling notation 2.0, which is published from OMG, and the latest specification is published in January 2014, and it's available for download. And from this specification has been a major part extracted and represented now with hashtag notation. And it's published now with my fourth patent application, which is published in 15th of May this year. And there you see the major part of the specification from Business Process Modeling Notation 2.0, which is now represented with hashtag notation. In the following representation, figure 2, are described further process steps of the business process coffee shop. The represented process steps show, how, among others, how a selection is represented with the CPW process method, and then how this selection is represented with Business Process Modeling Notation 2.0 as gateway. Figure 2 shows the representation of the business process coffee shop with further process steps with the CPW process method and the process steps with Business Process Modeling Notation 2.0. We have here again in the left two columns a representation with the CPW process method. On the right hand, the representation with Business Process Modeling Notation 2.0. We concentrate now to the gateway. You see on the right side the gateway and on the left hand the CPW process method. What we have here with the notation of the CPW process method, you have no extra graphical object for the gateway because it's not needed. And why? Because we have represented the gateway with hashtag notation. So Mary says a filter coffee or an Americano coffee. Then we have in the next row the abstraction, hashtag step 001, places questions with choice of a filter coffee or Americano coffee. And these questions has been used on the right side. But the right side is first of all an activity and task. And there the question is places questions with choice of a filter coffee or Americano coffee. And then we have the decision with gateway on the right side, where the client decides for a filter coffee and not for Americano coffee. And then the client decides for a filter coffee with space for milk. And then we have on the left hand, the decision for Americano coffee would be a sub-process. And on the right side, we have our Americano coffee and can also lead to a sub-process. But on the left hand, we have the answer. Coffee shop client Paul says a filter coffee with space for milk. And then we have again the abstraction. Hashtag step 001 decides for a filter coffee with space for milk. And this abstraction is used to represent on the right side Business Process Modeling Notation 2.0. Client decides for a filter coffee with space for milk. But then on the left hand, we have a further abstraction. Hashtag decision for product from client. But we haven't used this for the representation of Business Process Modeling Notation 2.0 at this stage. Now we have the representation of the CPW process in tabular format as CPW process level 1. In the following representation, figure 3 is represented the CPW process with the example coffee shop with several process steps as CPW process level 1. The CPW process level 1 has been taken one-to-one from the graphical representation of the CPW process from figure 1 and figure 2. The CPW process 1 can be described in direct speech, but it is not a must, and describes at the example coffee shop the dialogue between hashtag coffee shop sales assistant and hashtag coffee shop client. But in this case, at the CPW process level 1 is described the dialogue between hashtag coffee shop sales assistant and hashtag coffee shop client in direct speech. So we see here the CPW process level 1 in tabular format. On the left column, we have the hashtag process step number, starting with hashtag step 001. Then we have the swim lanes with function and responsibility, where we have now in this process coffee shop sales assistant and coffee shop client. And then in the left-hand third column, we have the CPW process step represented as a simple sentence with a CPW subject, a CPW predicate, and a CPW object in hashtag notation. So we have hashtag coffee shop sales assistant as a function of the CPW subject. And then we have the concrete name, hashtag Mary for the CPW subject. And then we have hashtag says CPW predicate and hashtag hello. And it's represented in direct speech. And then we have for each of them, we have an extra column. We have the CPW subject for the responsibility with coffee shop sales assistant extra column, for CPW subject, concrete name, Mary an extra column, and the extra column for the CPW predicate and CPW object. So it says coffee shop sales assistant, Mary says hello. And this representation is really helpful if you work with Excel, because you can use the filter function. So you have all these three process steps first of all, and then the second part is from hashtag step 4 to hashtag step 006. Figure 3 shows a representation of the CPW process in tabular format as CPW process level 1 from the example coffee shop. Overall describes the representation, the CPW process, the dialogue between hashtag coffee shop sales assistant and hashtag coffee shop client, and consists here of welcome, questions and answers, and decisions of the client regarding the product. Now we have the representation of the CPW process in tabular format as CPW process level 2. In the following representation, figure 4 is represented the CPW process with the example of coffee shop with several CPW process steps as CPW process level 2. The CPW process level 2 is derived from the CPW process level 1. The described dialog of the CPW process level 1 in direct speech is dissolved and is abstract. Furthermore, in addition, the CPW process step represented through the CPW process level 2 is described through an abstract function. Like listed in the last column, CPW function, which is then taken one-to-one to describe the process steps of business process modeling notation 2.0. The abstract function is represented in the hashtag notation as logical layer. And the abstract function is also listed in the graphical representation of the CPW process in the CPW object as hashtag notation in figure 1. Furthermore are the CPW process steps of the CPW process are assigned to the CPW logical layer, business process modeling notation 2.0. On the one hand is a CPW logical layer business process modeling notation 2.0 listed in the table of the second last column, CPW logical layer business process modeling notation 2.0, and on the other hand, in the graphical representation of the CPW process in the CPW object of figure 1 and figure 2. Figure 4 shows a representation of the CPW process in tabular format as CPW process level 2 from the example coffee shop. So we have here the tabular format of the CPW process level 2. We see here in the left column the process step number starting with hashtag step 001. Then we have again swim lane, function responsibility with coffee shop sales assistant, coffee shop client. And then we have here the CPW process step is completely represented as a simple sentence with a CPW subject, a CPW predicate, and a CPW object with hashtag notation. And it says here, coffee shop sales assistant says, welcome to client. And we see here that the direct speech is now dissolved and abstracted. And then on the following columns on the right side, we have each of them an extra column. An extra column for the CPW subject, for the CPW predicate, and the CPW object. And because of the abstraction, we have now here in the representation of the CPW process level 2 is the concrete name for the coffee shop sales assistant we left away. And also for the coffee shop client. So coffee shop sales assistant says welcome to client. And then on the right-hand columns. The second right-hand columns, we have the representation of the CPW process step with the CPW logical layer business process modeling notation 2.0. Hashtag activity, hashtag task. And then we have the abstracted function, CPW function, where it says hashtag welcoming to client, which is used to represent the process step of business process modeling notation 2.0. And then we have the representation of the following process steps. Now we have the representation of the CPW process in tabular format as CPW process level 3. In the following representation, figure 5, is represented then the CPW process with an example coffee shop with several CPW process steps as CPW process level 3. The CPW process level 3 is derived from the CPW process level 1 and the CPW process level 2. In the CPW process level 3, wherein the CPW process is represented as simple sentence, the CPW subject, the CPW predicate, and the CPW object are even more abstracted. Furthermore, in addition, is searched to the found abstract formulation, further generic terms and abstract terms to incorporate them into the formulations of the CPW objects. If there are found several generic terms, they can also be put into brackets so that the simple sentence represented as CPW process is still readable with a CPW subject, a CPW predicate, and a CPW object. Figure 5 shows the representation of the CPW process in tabular format as CPW process level 3 from the example coffee shop. So we see here the representation of the CPW process level 3. The left-hand column, process step number, the swim lanes with coffee and function and responsibility, coffee shop sales assistant, coffee shop client. Then we have again the representation of the CPW process step as a simple sentence with the CPW subject, CPW predicate, and the CPW object. In this example, in the first step, coffee shop sales assistant, hashtag coffee shop sales assistant with CPW subject, hashtag does, hashtag the welcome to the client. And we see here the process step is even more abstracted now. And then we have each of them for the CPW subject, CPW predicate, and CPW object an extra column, which is quite useful with Excel with a filter function. And in the last column, we have the representation of the CPW logical layer business process modeling notation 2.0. Here we have hashtag activity, hashtag task. And in the below, in the second last row, we have hashtag step 005 with hashtag gateway, hashtag exclusive gateway. But now we have this special feature because we look now for abstract key terms and also from attributes from key terms. And we see here in the last row, it says, for example, coffee shop client decides for filter coffee. And in brackets now we have product type and then for the space for milk, also filter coffee is product type, and with space for milk we have in brackets product type attribute. So now we have the creation of the CPW subject object context diagram clusters. These results are now enough to create the first draft of the CPW subject object context diagram. To create the CPW subject object context diagram is used especially the CPW process level 3, wherein to the described CPW process steps with the CPW processes also have been defined the generic terms in the CPW objects. To create the overall CPW subject object context diagram are created one to several clusters, the so-called CPW subject object context diagram clusters. If it is created enough CPW subject object context diagram clusters, it can be created then from the overall CPW subject object context diagram. The objective is with a created CPW subject object context diagram cluster to cover one to several CPW process steps from the CPW process level 3. In principle, there are created so many CPW subject object context diagram clusters until all CPW process steps of the complete end-to-end process of the CPW process level 3 are covered. Here is described the further approach. At the creation of the first CPW subject object context diagram cluster, you consider what is the overriding purpose or also the overall objective of the end-to-end business process. In this case, there are the business processes of the coffee shop, or more concrete, here it is the coffee shop order management within the coffee shop. With the found CPW objects with coffee shop and coffee shop order management is now the next question. Who is responsible for this? Or who is responsible for what? In the example, coffee shop with coffee shop order management is this the coffee shop sales assistant and the coffee shop client. Now are all CPW objects and CPW subjects complete to create the first CPW subject object context diagram cluster. The following representation, figure 6, shows the first CPW subject object context diagram cluster. We see here in the middle the overall end-to-end process, which is with the CPW object represented coffee shop order management. And it has the relationship overall to the coffee shop. And then we have on the left hand the coffee shop employee with coffee shop business area function and coffee shop roles, coffee shop roles. And in our CPW process steps, we have the coffee shop sales assistant, which is Mary. And on the right side, we have the coffee shop client, which is Paul. And here is the description from figure 6. And the next step is repeated the approach. It is always taken one to several CPW process steps from the CPW process level 3, and it is tried through the found generic and abstract terms to find the CPW subject and CPW objects, though that it can be created then the next CPW subject object context diagram cluster. Normally, it can be summarized one to several CPW process steps of the CPW process level 3 to a topic so that it can be created again the next CPW subject object context diagram cluster according to a topic. The approach is repeated as long as until all CPW process steps of the end-to-end business process of the CPW process level 3 have been covered. Furthermore, it has to be considered how the relationships are to the found CPW subject and CPW objects, and furthermore, which attributes can be assigned to the CPW subjects and CPW objects, and how are their characteristics. Among others is again and again a very important attribute, the status of a CPW process step of the CPW process level 3, which can be assigned then to a CPW object of a CPW subject object context diagram cluster. In the following representation, figures 7, 8, 9, and 10 are represented the further created CPW subject object context diagram clusters from the end-to-end business process of the CPW process level 3 of the coffee shop and coffee shop order management. We have here above in the middle the overall end-to-end process, which is represented with a CPW object, coffee shop, order management. And then we have welcome and welcome types for the coffee shop employee, which is the coffee shop sales assistant, and for the coffee shop client. Here's the description from figure 7. Now we have the next one. We have here now the dialogue question answers and dialogue question answers types, which is the dialogue between coffee shop employee and coffee shop client, which is coffee shop sales assistant Mary in our concrete example, and coffee shop client Paul. And all these questions and answers as a dialogue, which are first of all in direct speech and afterwards the dialogue is abstracted, all these are now represented with these CPW objects, with dialogue questions answers and dialogue questions types. The description from figure 8. And now we have the next one. So we have here the overall end-to-end process with coffee shop order management, and this has now a relationship to coffee shop service product and coffee shop service product types, which has a relationship to coffee shop employee, coffee shop sales assistant, and coffee shop client. So we have coffee shop service product types and coffee shop service product. Furthermore, we have coffee shop types cup and milk bar. What we see here, milk bar has a relationship to coffee shop client, but no relationship to coffee shop employee. But later on, I tell you more about it. Here's the description from figure 9. And here we have again the end-to-end process with coffee shop order management, and now we have farewell and farewell types between coffee shop employee, coffee shop sales assistant, and coffee shop client. Here's the description from figure 10. Now we are coming to the creation of the overall CPW subject-object context diagram. With the so far created CPW subject-object context diagram clusters, it is now possible to create the overall CPW subject-object context diagram for the end-to-end business process of the CPW process level 3 of the coffee shop order management. The following representation, figure 11, shows the overall CPW subject-object context diagram for the coffee shop order management of the end-to-end business process of the CPW process level 3. Figure 11 shows a representation of the overall CPW subject-object context diagram from the example coffee shop. So we have above in the middle, we have the overall end-to-end process, which is coffee shop order management. And we have the relationship to coffee shop, of course. And then on the left hand, the relationship to coffee shop employee, which is coffee shop sales assistant, which can have a coffee shop business area function or coffee shop roles. On the right hand, we have coffee shop client. And then we have all these CPW objects now from the CPW subject-object context diagram clusters, which are welcome and welcome types. And then we have dialog questions answers and dialog questions answers types. And then we have coffee shop service product and coffee shop service product types. And then we have coffee types cup and milk bar. And at the end, we have farewell types and farewell until the client leaves the coffee shop and is happy for the day with his coffee. Now we have the representation of the CPW process in tabular format as CPW process level 3 with the additional columns of attributes channels. In the following representation, figure 12, the CPW process level 3 approach is refined, sophisticated, and verified with the additional column of hashtag CPW subject level 3 attribute channel, hashtag CPW subject level 3 attribute channel, key terms with characteristics, CPW subject with attributes and characteristic attribute channels. What we see here, and the same for the CPW object level 3 attribute channel, CPW object level 3 attribute channel, key terms with characteristics, CPW object with attributes and characteristics attribute channels. What we see here, that the CPW subject has one attribute channel, and the CPW object has also one attribute channel. But within the CPW subject, it can be, and the attribute channel for the CPW subject, it can have one to several attributes channels, because one to several attribute channels are assigned to different categories, which can be assigned to one CPW subject. And the same for the CPW object. The CPW object has one attribute channel, within this attribute channel, it can be one to several attribute channels which are assigned to one to several categories. In the column CPW, in the column hashtag CPW subject level 3 attribute channel are listed all found terms or generic or abstract terms with the attributes and characteristics. And the same is also for the column CPW object level 3 attribute channel, where also here all found terms or generic and abstract terms with their attributes and characteristics are listed. So we see here the representation of the CPW process level 3 in tabular format with attribute channels. The left-hand column is the process step number starting with hashtag step 001, and then we have the swim lane with function and responsibility with coffee shop sales assistant, coffee shop client, and then we have the complete CPW process step represented as a simple sentence with a CPW subject, a CPW predicate, and the CPW object represented with hashtag notation, where we see here the hashtag step 001, coffee shop sales assistant, hashtag does, hashtag the welcoming to the client. So coffee shop sales assistant is a CPW subject, hashtag does is the CPW predicate, and hashtag the welcoming to the client is the CPW object. And then we have each of them, again, for the CPW subject, CPW predicate, and the CPW object, each of them an extra column. But now also an extra column for the CPW subject level 3 attribute channel for the CPW subject, and the CPW object attribute channel for the CPW object. And then we look now for these abstract key terms and attributes, and we take now the last row is step 006. There we have here for the attribute channel of the CPW object, we have here product type filter coffee and product type filter coffee with product type attribute space for milk. And we see here the representation in brackets to represent abstract key terms is still there, but the reason is for these brackets is to make that the CPW process step, which is represented as a simple sentence with a CPW subject, CPW predicate, and CPW object is still readable. But on the other hand, is this approach with the brackets limited, and for this reason we have now the attribute channel, one attribute channel for the CPW subject, and this as other attribute channel for the CPW object. And the last column, you see here the representation with CPW logical layer business process modeling notation 2.0, which is with hashtag activity hashtag task for the example, and later on in the following rows we have hashtag gateway, hashtag exclusive gateway. Figure 12 shows a representation of the CPW process in tabular format as CPW process level 3 with the additional columns of attribute channels. Now we have the creation of the CPW subject-object relationship diagram. All between steps are done, you can begin with the creation of the CPW subject-object relationship diagram. Whereby the order of the steps can be regarded as agile or also iterative, or it can be possible to skip certain steps where it makes sense for the analyst. It is within the discretion of the analyst which steps of the phases are more important and which steps the analyst is doing first. To create the CPW subject-object relationship diagram are considered now all relationship of the CPW process level 3 of the end-to-end process of the coffee shop order management. In every CPW process step of the CPW process level 3 of the CPW process is looked how the relationship is of the CPW predicate between the CPW subject and the CPW object, and this relationship with the CPW predicate is transformed then into the current overall CPW subject-object context diagram. Until then, it develops step by step a complete and acceptable subject-object relationship diagram. In some cases, it can be realized that in the CPW subject-object relationship diagram, at a relationship between a CPW subject and a CPW object, it is possible to assign one to several CPW predicates. This can be named as more-dimensional relationship, and the reason for this is because the more-dimensional relationship covers one to several CPW process steps with the different CPW predicates of the CPW process level 3. The following representation, figure 13, shows a CPW subject relationship diagram for the coffee shop order management. So we have here above the overall end-to-end process, which is represented with coffee shop order management, which has a relationship to the coffee shop employee, which is the coffee shop sales assistant with coffee shop business area function or coffee shop roles, which is our coffee shop sales assistant in our concrete example, Mary. On the right hand, we have the relationship to coffee shop client, which is Paul. And then we have the further CPW objects. We have the welcome and welcome types. We have the dialogue with question and answers, and dialogue, question and answers types, which is overall the dialogue between the coffee shop sales assistant or coffee shop employee and the coffee shop client with questions and answers. And then we have the coffee shop service product, coffee shop service product and coffee shop service types. And we see here now with a CPW as an example, the coffee shop service product as a relationship with a CPW predicate to the CPW subject, which is coffee shop client. And then we have here orders, decides, pays, and takes. And this is the representation is named as more-dimensional relationship. Because all these we looked before for the CPW process level 3, and we looked for all process steps which are assigned to different topics, and we have taken we looked for the relationship between the CPW subject and the CPW object, and we have always taken the CPW predicate and put this CPW predicate into now the relationship between the CPW subject, coffee shop client, and the CPW object, coffee shop service product. And then we have now here the relationship orders, decides, pays, and takes. And the same we have done for the coffee shop sales assistant, coffee shop employee with a relationship to the coffee shop service product as a CPW object, and then we have ask, gives, and takes. Also here we have a more dimensional relationship. But now we have something more. As we see here, we have a relationship, milk bar, uses, coffee shop client. What does it mean? In case the coffee shop client takes an order, he takes a filter coffee with space for milk. Afterwards, he goes to the milk bar and fills the coffee with a milk bottle with a milk to his cup, and this works normally if milk is in the bottle. And afterwards he is happy, and he will stay for some time in the coffee shop, and then afterwards he will leave the coffee shop and have a nice day with his coffee with milk. But now we see here the milk bar has no relationship to coffee shop employee, which means we have no description in case if the milk bottle is empty. We have currently no description of the process steps where in case the milk bottle is empty, that the coffee shop sales assistant goes and looks for the milk bottle if the milk bottle is empty, and in case the milk bottle is empty, he will fill the milk bottle again with milk. These process steps are missing, which means if the client try to fill his coffee with milk and the milk bottle is empty, is first of all game over. But then he have to ask the coffee shop sales assistant that the bottle is empty. But these process steps should be also described in a later stage. Which means the CPW subject-object relationship diagram is represented with the current stage of the described CPW process steps, with the graphical representation, but also with the CPW process steps of CPW process step level 1, level 2, and level 3. And also here, we see here for the coffee shop sales assistant, we have here for the dialogue question answers, we have here the CPW object with dialogue question answers. We have also here ask, and coffee shop client has answers. Because at the current stage of described CPW process steps, we have only questions from the coffee shop employee, and we have only coffee shop for the coffee shop client, we have only answers. And if we would have further described process steps for between the dialogue of coffee shop employee and the coffee shop client, then it could be that we have also the case that the coffee shop client have questions and ask the employee something, or the coffee shop sales assistant, and the coffee shop employee or coffee shop sales assistant will also answer something. And then we would have here also a more dimensional relationship with asks and answers, and also here with answers and ask. So we see here now the overall CPW subject-object relationship diagram. The overall CPW subject-object relationship diagram, and with the overall end-to-end process with coffee shop order management, and then also with these further CPW objects with welcome and welcome types, and also dialogue questions answers types, and then we have the coffee shop service product and coffee shop service product types. At the end, we have the farewell and farewell types, and the coffee shop client has, in our case, the filter coffee with space for milk, and afterwards he went to the milk bar and filled his cup with a milk bottle and left afterwards the coffee shop and make now a nice day with his coffee, filter coffee with milk. So figure 13 shows a representation of the CPW subject-object relationship diagram for the coffee shop order management. So transformation of the CPW subject-object relationship diagram into the entity relationship diagram. After the creation of the CPW subject-object relationship diagram can be transformed, the results into an entity relationship diagram, though that there can be developed a logical entity relationship diagram. Conclusion. With the Agile CPW subject-object relationship diagram modeling and the CPW process modeling with the CPW process method and the CPW method is introduced a method modeling approach for business process design, business process improvement, and business process transformation can be realized and transformed in an agile way. What we see here now is the references. The first references is the published patent application from 15th May this year, which is the fourth patent application, and where is also published the CPW Logical Layer Business Process Modeling Notation 2.0. Then we have the two further references from Peter Chen for English-Chinese entity relationship diagrams, and also entity relationship diagram modeling, historically events, future trends, and lessons learned. And then we have with reference 4, we have the published specification from Business Process Modeling Notation, version 2 02 from January 2014. And then we have a further reference with Peter Chen from Ancient Egypt's Language to Future Conceptual Modeling. And the last one is also a publication for the business process modeling notation. And the specification from reference 4 is business process modeling notation version 2.02 from January 2014 is from OMG and can be downloaded. So thank you very much for your attention, where I presented to you the subject, the Agile CPW subject object relationship diagram modeling with the CPW process modeling, with the CPW process method and the CPW method. And if you have further questions, please contact me. Thank you very much again, and I wish you a nice day and see you next time.